Master and Man by Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 9. Having floundered his way back to the sledge, Vasily Andreich caught hold of it and stood there a long time without moving, trying to calm himself and catch his breath. Nikita was not where he had been, but something lay in the sledge, already drifted over with snow, and Vasily Andreich guessed that it was Nikita. His fear was quite gone now. If he was afraid of anything, it was only of that terrible state of fear he had felt on the horse, and above all when he was left alone in the snowdrift. Whatever it cost, he must not let that fear reach him, and to keep it out, he had to do something, busy himself with something. So the first thing he did was to stand with his back to the wind and loosen his fur coat. Then, as soon as he was breathing a little easier, he shook the snow out of his boots and out of his left glove. The right one was hopelessly lost, most likely a foot under the snow somewhere by now. Then he cinched his sash tight and low, the way he used to when he stepped out of his shop to buy the grain the peasants brought in on their carts, and made himself ready for action. The first task that presented itself was to get the horse's leg free of the rein. Vasily Andreich did it, freed the rein, and tied Mukorty back to the iron bracket at the front of the sledge, in his old place. He was moving around behind the horse to straighten the breeching, the pad, and the sacking on his back, when he saw something stir in the sledge, and out of the snow that covered it rose Nikita's head. Plainly with great effort, Nikita, already freezing to death, raised himself and sat up, and waved a hand before his nose in a strange way, as if brushing away flies. He waved his hand and said something, and it seemed to Vasily Andreich that he was calling him. Vasily Andreich left the sacking as it was, and went up to the sledge. "What is it?" he asked. "What are you saying?" "I'm dying, that's what," Nikita brought out with effort, in a broken voice. "Give what I've earned to my boy, or to the wife, it's all one." "Why, are you frozen through?" asked Vasily Andreich. "I feel it, this is my death." "Forgive me, for Christ's sake," said Nikita in a tearful voice, still waving his hands before his face, as if brushing away flies. Vasily Andreich stood silent and motionless for half a minute. Then suddenly, with the same decisiveness with which he struck hands on a profitable deal, he took a step back, pushed up the sleeves of his fur coat, and with both hands set about scooping the snow off Nikita and out of the sledge. When the snow was out, Vasily Andreich hastily undid his sash, spread open his coat, and pushing Nikita down lay on top of him, covering him not only with his fur coat, but with the whole of his warm, glowing body. He tucked the skirts of the coat down between Nikita and the sides of the sledge, gripped its hem with his knees, and lay like that face down, his head braced against the front of the sledge. And now he no longer heard the horse's movements or the whistling of the storm. He only listened to Nikita's breathing. For a long time Nikita lay without moving. Then he sighed loudly and stirred. "There, you see, and you said you were dying. Lie still, get warm. This is how we—" Vasily Andreich began, but to his own great astonishment he could not go on, because tears came to his eyes and his lower jaw began to jump. He stopped speaking and only swallowed at what kept rising in his throat. "That fright got to me, it seems. I've gone weak all over," he thought about himself. But this weakness, far from being unpleasant, gave him a special joy he had never felt before. "This is how we do it," he said to himself, feeling a strange, solemn tenderness. He lay that way a good while in silence, wiping his eyes on the fur of his coat and tucking back under his knee the right skirt, which the wind kept turning up. But he wanted so passionately to tell someone about his joyful state. "Nikita," he said. "It's good, warm," came the answer from below. "There, you see, brother, I nearly perished out there, and you would have frozen, and I would have." But here his jaw began to quiver again, and his eyes filled again with tears, and he could not go on. "Well, no matter," he thought. "I know about myself what I know." And he fell silent. He lay like that a long time. He was warm from below, from Nikita, and warm from above, under the coat. Only his hands, with which he held the coat skirts down along Nikita's sides, and his legs, from which the wind kept pulling the coat away, were beginning to freeze. The right hand without its glove froze worst of all. But he did not think about his legs or his hands. He thought only of how to warm the peasant lying under him. Several times he glanced at the horse and saw that his back was uncovered, the sacking and breeching lying on the snow, and that he ought to get up and cover him. but he could not bring himself to leave Nikita even for a minute and break the joyful state he was in. He felt no fear of any kind now. No fear. This one won't slip away from me, he said to himself, about warming the peasant, with the same boastfulness he used when he talked of his buying and selling. Vasily Andreich lay like that for an hour, and another, and a third, but he never noticed the time passing. At first, impressions of the blizzard drifted through his mind, of the sledge shafts and the horse under the shaft bow shaking before his eyes, and he remembered Nikita lying beneath him. Then memories of the holiday began to mix in, of his wife, the police officer, the candle box, and again of Nikita, this time lying under the candle box. Then came peasants selling and buying, and white walls, and houses roofed with iron, with Nikita lying underneath them. Then it all ran together, one thin flowed into another, and like the colors of the rainbow joining into one white light, all the different impressions came together into one nothing, and he fell asleep. He slept long, without dreams, but toward dawn the visions came again. He seemed to be standing by the candle box, and Tikhon's wife was asking him for a 5-kopeck candle for the feast day, and he wanted to take a candle and give it to her, but his hands would not lift. They were stuck fast in his pockets. He wanted to walk around the box, but his feet would not move, and his galoshes, new and freshly polished, had grown to the stone floor and could not be lifted, and his feet could not be pulled out of them. And suddenly the candle box was not a candle box but a bed, and Vasily Andreich saw himself lying belly down on the candle box, that is, on his own bed in his own house. He lay on the bed and could not get up, and he needed to get up because any moment now Ivan Matveyevich, the police officer, would come by for him, and he had to go with Ivan Matveyevich, either to bargain for the grove or to straighten the breaching on Mukorty. He asked his wife, "Well, Mikhailovna, hasn't he come?" "No," she said, "he hasn't." He heard someone driving up to the porch. "That must be him." "No, gone past." Mikhailovna, still not here." "No." And he lay on the bed and still could not get up, and kept waiting, and the waiting was eerie and joyful at once, and then suddenly the joy was fulfilled. The one he had been waiting for came, and it was no longer Ivan Matveyevich, the police officer, but someone else, and yet it was the very one he had been waiting for. He came and called him, and this one who called him was the same one who had called out to him and told him to lie down on Nikita. And Vasily Andreich was glad that this someone had come for him. "Coming," he cried out joyfully, and the cry woke him, and he woke, but woke as someone else entirely, not the man who had fallen asleep. He tried to get up, and could not. He tried to move his arm, and could not. His leg, and could not. He tried to turn his head, and could not do that either. And he was surprised, but not in the least distressed by it. He understood that this was death, and was not in the least distressed by that either. And he remembered that Nikita was lying under him, and that Nikita had gotten warm and was alive, and it seemed to him that he was Nikita, and Nikita was he, and that his life was not in himself, but in Nikita. He strained his ears, and heard Nikita's breathing, even his faint snoring. "Nikita is alive, so I am alive too," he said to himself in triumph. And he remembered the money, the shop, the house, the buying and selling, and the Miranov's millions, and it was hard for him to understand why that man, the one called Vasily Brekhanov, had busied himself with all the things he had busied himself with. Well, he didn't know what it was all about. He thought about Vasily Brekhanov. He didn't know, but now I know. Now there's no mistake. Now I know. And again he heard the call of the one who had called him before. "Coming, coming," his whole being answered, joyfully, tenderly, and he felt that he was free, and that nothing held him any longer. And nothing more did Vasily Andreich see or hear or feel in this world. All around, the snow smote on as before. The same whirls of snow spun round, covering the dead Vasily Andreich's fur coat, and Mukorty shivering from head to foot, and the sledge barely visible now, and deep inside it, warm under his dead master, Nikita.